TFA fam, welcome back in. We are on to week 3. We have our top 24 running back rankings. Kev, let's not waste any of the people's time. Let's just dive right in, shall we? Our RB1 for week 3 is, surprise, surprise, Christian McCaffrey, followed by Tony Pollard, Austin Eckler, Bijan Robinson, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker III, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Josh Jacobs, Ramondre Stevenson, Raheem Mostert, making an appearance, and then Miles Sanders rounding out our top 12. Kev, who do you like here out of these RB1s? What do you have to say about the running backs for week 3?
Yeah, first off, let's talk about some Tony Pollard. Obviously, he gets a dream matchup against Arizona. He's now scored 20 fantasy points in back-to-back weeks. And all the stuff that we talked about him over the offseason that we thought he was going to be the true workhorse has come to fruition at this point. 64% of the RB rush attempts, 65% of the rushing yards, and 73% of the RB targets on the season so far. He also has 7 carries inside the 5-yard line through the first 2 weeks. And for context, he only had 9 all last season. So he is definitely getting all of the work. The RB1 upside is very real here for him. And now he takes on a Cardinals defense that has allowed the 14th most fantasy points to running backs. And some of that is also just kind of game script. They got up really quickly last week. And so, the Giants had to come back and throw the ball a ton in that game and really not really run the ball as much. And so some of that is game script dependent. I am not worried whatsoever about Tony Pollard against the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is a great matchup. Next up, I do want to mention Austin Eckler. I don't really think he's going to be ready this week. Brandon Staley came out today and said they don't really have a timetable yet for his return. And so I do not expect him to play, but we wanted to put him in here in the event that he does, because it is a very good matchup against the Minnesota Vikings defense. So next up, Nick Chubb. I wanted to talk about him. Obviously, he suffered what is likely a devastating knee injury. Jerome Ford is likely the starter, but they get the worst matchup you could possibly get, and that is against the elite Titans run defense. The Titans have allowed only 7.9 PPR points per game and less than 50 yards rushing per game to the opposing running back. So while I think Jerome Ford is probably right now the likely scenario of the guy that you want to go pick up if he's available in any league, but do keep in mind that you do not want to play him in this matchup. And I think there's a real likelihood they go out and add somebody, whether that's Kareem Hunt and bring him back, whether that is Leonard Fournette or something like this. I do not think that they're going to continue to roll with Jerome Ford as a starting running back, but we will see. I at least think he's at least worth a speculative add, if any. Anyways, let's keep it moving here. Kenneth Walker versus Carolina. Now, everybody that operated in the offseason as Zach Charbonnet was going to be a huge problem for Kenneth Walker doesn't look great anymore, because he is clearly the RB1 in this backfield. 63% of the snaps, 74% of the carries, 44% of the routes, and 11% target share. And if that 11% target share can hold throughout the season, he is going to be a very easy RB1 for rest of season, because right now he is the bell cow back. This week, the Seahawks get a great matchup against the Panthers defense that has struggled to stop the run. This is somebody that I am definitely going to be looking to play this week. He is a smash spot for Kenneth Walker. And then next up, same situation we could talk about with Kenneth Walker. We could talk about Travis Etienne, because everybody was saying Tank Bigsby was going to come in and take this job from Travis Etienne, which just sounds ridiculous on his face. But Travis Etienne gets a great matchup against Houston. 76% of the snaps for Travis Etienne so far, 69% of the carries, 68% of the routes, and a 12% target per route run rate, which is also excellent. He's also 15th in yards after contact per attempt, 8th in missed tackles forced per attempt, and 17th in PFF's elusive rating. So, I mentioned the Texans. They have been pretty bad to start the season, allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the position, which nothing's really changed here from last week or last year to this year. Nothing's really changed there in that situation. Ramondre Stevenson next up. It's funny that everybody was super worried about Ramondre Stevenson after last week because of Ezekiel Elliott, but here we are, but it is really ridiculous, because his usage really is that of an elite running back. 73% of the snaps, 61% of the RB carries, 58% of the routes, and 14% target per route run rate. The Jets have actually not been that great against the run so far. They've allowed the 11th most PPR points to the position. They've also allowed the 14th most rushing yards and the 5th most receiving yards to running backs for the first 2 weeks of the season. Now, obviously, it's still a small sample size, but they have struggled to stop the run. And Ramondre Stevenson is getting all of the work. He had a solid week this past week. And so Ramondre Stevenson versus the New York Jets is the other guy that I wanted to hit on. I think all of these guys are really strong plays.
Yeah, just to touch on the Austin Eckler thing real quick, and then we'll jump over to the RB2s. If you picked up Josh Kelly and started him last week, do not drop him this week. It's a much better matchup going up against Minnesota. So if you need Joshua Kelly for this week as the Austin Eckler replacement, you can go back to him this week. That was an absolutely awful matchup against Tennessee in week 2, looking better for him in week 3. So our RB2s are as follows. We have James Cook at 13, followed by Kyron Williams, Aaron Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, Najee Harris, Alexander Madison, DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, Brian Robinson, Damian Pierce, Rashad White, and your boy Javonte Williams. Kev, same deal here. RB2s, who do you like? What spots? I think you're going to talk about someone you don't like.
Yeah. So first off, let's talk about Najee Harris. Right. I get it. He's been awful. He has been dreadful, really, for the most part, through the first 2 weeks of the season, and he's been not efficient whatsoever. He hasn't really been much of a threat in the passing game. And Jalen Warren has looked like Tony Pollard. Right. Like this is like that situation last year, almost coming to fruition this year with this situation. But I will say this: if I'm going to give Najee Harris any sort of a pass, it is the matchups that they have had over the first 2 games of the season. They have faced 2 of the best run defenses in the league to start the year. The Browns have been fantastic, and then they had the 49ers the week prior. So some of that should be taken into consideration. And it's not like Jalen Warren is out here running the football at this elite level, this past week against the Browns. This week, it is going to change because they get a dream matchup against the Raiders. The Raiders have allowed the second most PPR points to the position, and they've allowed nearly 300 rushing yards or 135.5 per game to start the season. So, but I will say, if Najee Harris does not figure it out soon, we are going to see a lot more of Jalen Warren. And you could see Najee Harris fall back into maybe even a 50-50 split here in this backfield. But I will give him somewhat of a pass because the 2 matchups they've had have been absolutely brutal to start the season. So I did want to hit on him. Now, I have Raheem Mostert just outside of an RB1. I know you have him inside as an RB1. Our consensus ranking has him as an RB1. I have him at RB14 this week, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So on the season, he is definitely the workhorse. 74% of the snaps, 79% of the RB carries, and he has run 65% of the routes, but he's only receiving a 6% target per route run rate right now. And so until he's more involved as a pass catcher, it does limit his upside a little bit. But he is clearly the lead back behind with Jeff Wilson's sideline. He is the RB6 over the first 2 weeks of the season. He's 11th in yards per contact per attempt and 13th in missed tackles forced, as well as elusive rating as well. Now, this is a pretty good matchup against Denver. Denver has allowed the 14th most PPR points to running backs, but they've also allowed the 5th most touchdowns as well. So this is a really good spot for Raheem Mostert, but his ceiling sometimes can be a little bit capped in the event because he is not utilized heavily in the passing game. But if he can continue to run this pure as a runner, it is 100% going to be a strong start for him again this week. So I think he is a very high-end RB2 play. Let's talk about Alexander Madison next versus LA Chargers. Again, another player that has been absolutely dreadful to start the season, but he still is the workhorse back here as things stand. 74% of the snaps, 79% of the RB rush attempts, 57% of the routes, and 17% target per route run rate to start the season, which is excellent. But he is terrible. 30th in yards after contact per attempt, zero, not even 1 missed tackles forced, and 8th. He is 8th worst in rush yards over expectation so far to start the season. But I will say the same thing. He has faced the Bucks and the Eagles. Each team has 2 of the best run defenses in the league. It has been terrible for him to start the season. I get it, but the Chargers is a much better matchup. They've allowed the 11th most rushing yards and the 9th most fantasy points to running back. So Alexander Madison is in a much better spot this week. I think he's a really good RB2 play. And then let's talk about Kyron Williams. I guess Cam Akers is dead. Now there's reports out there he's going to get traded. It's like deja vu all the way from last year. But Kyron Williams, 82% of the snaps so far to start the season. He is only getting 58% of the RB rush attempts, but he's running a route on. But he's run 76% of the RB routes and a 13% target per route run rate so far. The Bengals have not been very good against opposing running backs. They've allowed the 4th most rushing yards, but the 18th most PPR points to position so far. But Kyron Williams right now, I think, is a pretty strong week-to-week RB2 because of his usage in the passing game. I don't know how long this holds. I don't know if this is going to be something he gets for the entire season. But right now, he is getting all of the work in this backfield. We know Sean McVay loves having a workhorse back. So he is another guy that I would definitely be taking a look at this week. Other guys that I did want to mention, I know a lot of people are going to be high on DeAndre Swift, but this is not a good matchup. I know he's coming off a really strong performance last week against the Minnesota Vikings, but this is not a good matchup against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They still possess one of the better run defenses in the league. So I would temper expectations on firing up DeAndre Swift. Isaiah Pacheco is in an actually really good spot, 12 carries, 70 yards last week for him. He is still splitting touches with the other running backs in the backfield, but this is a really good matchup against Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears are not very good against the run at all so far to start the season. And so I do think this could be a spot you see Isaiah Pacheco find the end zone. The Chiefs offense start to figure it out a little bit after a poor performance last week. Brian Robinson, not efficient. We've known that. He's never probably going to be an efficient runner, but he's going to continue to see this type of workload where he's seeing 18 to 20 plus touches per game and also be utilized a little bit in the passing game. He is going to be a week-to-week RB2 moving forward. And then you have Dameon Pierce, who is drawing near dead. And it's really not Dameon Pierce's fault at this point. They are missing 4/5 of their starting offensive line. Laramie Tunsil's out. Titus Howard is on IR. Juice Scruggs is on IR. Like all of these, the only guy that's left is Shaq Mason is the only guy they have left. Everybody they have put in has gotten hurt. And so it is hard to blame somebody when they are running behind one of probably the worst offensive line you could think of imaginable because of injuries. Laramie Tunsil should be back shortly. And then you should also have Titus Howard and Juice Scruggs will return. They're both on short-term IR. They're not out for the year like Kenyon Green, who is their left guard, who is out for the year. Overall, it's just been a really bad spot. And at this point, I don't think you can play Dameon Pierce until the time being. Tough time putting him at RB24, and that was mainly because he is still the starter, and that is only because of some of the injuries we've just recently had. Jamal Williams also got hurt, had to leave the game on Monday night against the Panthers, so that also hurt. But next up, I just want to hit on Rachaad White. I don't think, again, kind of similar situation, really bad matchup against Philadelphia in this matchup here. He has to get usage out of the passing game to really be useful this week. Again, another guy, if you don't have to play him, I probably wouldn't because it's not a good matchup. And then some of the other guys, I know a lot of people are going to be talking about running out, like I said, picking up a Jerome Ford or a Tony Jones Jr. or something like that. I don't know if I want to play any of those guys.
Yeah, man. The only thing I have to add, you were mentioning, rattling off all the injuries we have in the waiver wire pickups. David Montgomery, it's really weird. You had David Montgomery come out and say like, hey, that this could take me a few weeks to heal, and then the head coach Dan Campbell comes out and just like, nah, he's day to day. So I don't know what to expect there. Craig Reynolds would obviously be the guy to pick up. We didn't see Jahmyr Gibbs and his involvement really tick up after David Montgomery went out. So Craig Reynolds will get some run if David Montgomery is out, but we just don't know how that's going to pan out yet. We're recording this on Monday night, so we don't have that information yet. And then the other guys I just want to throw in, the Ravens running backs, I think both are in play going up against Indy. So if you picked up one of those guys off of waivers, I think you could plug them in this week if you have to. I think they're in the flex consideration going up against the Colts.
Yeah, no, Dan Campbell didn't even just say he is day-to-day. He said he is day-to-day whether he likes it or not. And so I don't know if I've ever heard a coach say that before. I was like, oh, okay. I guess Dan Campbell don't play. So that being said, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. If you have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. We will be sure to answer them. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.